Alright, I hadn't intended to make a follow-up on my previous video, but here we are. If you're out on the loop on the Crytek situation, here's what you need to know. Crytek is laying off 15% of their 400 employees, pausing development on Crysis 4, and will be moving staff to focus on Hunt Showdown. And while that is a terrible situation for all of the affected former staff members, and I sort of felt the timing for the layoffs were a bit odd in the aftermath of the huge payouts to Post Malone and the big marketing spending in relation to the Post Malone murder circus, which had concluded only 2 days prior to the statement, I thought I at least could chalk it up to, well, that's part of the industry and that is how the game goes. Because at least they didn't fire employees who was part of the Hunt team. Well, that was my opinion when I posted my previous video. But then Huge uploaded a video about the situation as well, where he mentioned something rather interesting. It turns out that the former community manager, Iceman2K, had replied to the tweet about layoffs on Crytek's profile. And he mentioned that several people from within the Hunt Showdown team had lost their jobs as well. Now, as if this situation wasn't already a bit sketchy, this puts the entire situation in a completely different light, and I think it reflects extremely poorly on Crytek and is a detrimental blow to their credibility as a company. Running a massive event with a huge celebrity like Post Malone attached to it for 3 entire months, on top of the marketing that goes hand in hand with such a commitment, must have had a massive price tag attached to it. And with this recent huge amount of spending in mind, following the statement on the layoffs, it inevitably begs the question, why now? Putting this message out only 2 days after such a major event concluded communicates that Crytek clearly knew these layoffs were coming. There is simply no way that management all of a sudden, at the end of this big event, out of the blue, suddenly realized that there was a problem financially. But they waited until after the event ended to announce it. Why? Well, I think it was to avoid the negative impact of that particular statement, so they could maximize the potential revenue of the event without having to deal with the fallout of negativity that would come on social media from laying off such a big part of their workforce. But that is only one and maybe the least damning aspect of this situation, because the statement, as well as the timing, also indirectly tells us that Crytek is absolutely ruthless. They make it seem that the employees, the very people that actually build and maintain their game, is immediately disposable after crunch time is concluded. Crytek might argue that this was an unavoidable financial decision and had nothing to do with the Post Malone event, but if that were the case, why not communicate it earlier? Why not be upfront instead of waiting until the event was over? Had they made any announcement beforehand talking about the potential financial issues that they were having and maybe even spaced out the layoffs over a period of time, this would have reflected completely different on the situation. But instead, they have been posting job hirings and congratulating the new people that have joined their company. This is a clear indication that their margins and profit plays a much bigger role in their priorities than fostering a workplace of integrity and trust. And speaking of trust, this leads me to us, the players. Because live service games rely on long-term player engagement, and announcing significant layoffs right after such a big event signals to us players that things at Crytek may not be as stable as they seem. This will make many players very cautious about investing their time and money into the game, as it could raise fear about the game's longevity, leading to lower player retention, which is already being reflected, as that is currently what we're seeing within the game. The amount of veteran players that have vocally made their dissatisfaction apparent and left the game as a consequence of its decline should be something that indicated to Crytek that a part of their core audience is not enjoying their product the same way they used to. And this is not something that has happened overnight. This is something that the community has been trying to tell Crytek for years. Yet it is quite obvious that Crytek intentionally have turned a deaf ear to the feedback provided by the community for a long time now, and have convinced themselves that they know how to solve the situation by going strictly on their gut feeling instead of listening to the feedback the player base is giving them. This lack of ability to listen, implement, and communicate with the community is among one of the many major issues that a lot of players find frustrating with Crytek's approach, and further serves to add tension between the company and its player base when gameplay mechanics or changes that no one has either asked for or requested are suddenly implemented or removed. And on top of that, with so many staff members gone, other concerns surface as well. What happens to Shoutout now? Will development slow down? Will the roadmap for future updates change? And will the game receive the same level of support and development that we expect as players? We have already seen players express doubt, concerns, and frustration about the current state of the game, but if player engagement continues to drop because of this uncertainty, Crytek could potentially find themselves in a downward spiral where lower engagement leads to lower revenue, which will then lead to even more cutbacks. What makes this whole situation even worse is that this isn't the first time Crytek has found itself in financial trouble. Back in 2014, reports surfaced that the company was struggling so bad that employees weren't even getting paid on time. Back then, Crytek chalked it up to internal miscommunication while they were scrambling to secure additional funding, which they later claimed to have resolved. But if history has taught us anything, it's that these kind of financial crises don't just disappear. They linger, and they resurface when bad management lets them fester. And right now, it's looking like we're seeing the same pattern play out all over again. This entire situation and the way it has been handled, not just now, but the many months leading up to it as well, suggests that the management at Crytek is poor and unprofessional at best, and at its worst, driven completely by corporate greed, which is the absolute last thing a company running a live service should reflect. And that made me think of a comment that one of you guys wrote on the last video I posted. After rereading that, I went to Glassdoor, which is a website where people can post reviews of their former or current employers, to look at a couple of the reviews from Crytek employees. And to my surprise, they all mirrored the exact same message: poor management, being out of touch, lack of understanding, a work environment where leadership makes decisions without being challenged, leading to a lack of accountability, as well as a general underlying issue of the approach to development changing on a regular basis, suggesting that lack of proper planning and unfocused direction was rampant among management. And these reviews weren't only new, some of them went years back. On top of that, I've received a message from an individual claiming to have worked at Crytek, echoing these exact same concerns: poor management, lack of direction, and an unwillingness to challenge leadership decisions. While I can't independently verify each of these claims, the fact that these reports align with publicly available employee reviews suggests a deeper systemic issue within Crytek. The sheer lack of direction by the management is further reflected by the game's transition into Shoutout 1896. Shoutout, the old version, was a game that was already consisting of spaghetti code, was highly unstable, and bug-filled to a degree where Crytek couldn't make patches or hotfixes of one bug without creating two more. It was a game that needed crucial first aid through immense bug fixing if it was to survive, but instead, management went with their gut feeling and decided that the way to move forward was not by fixing Hunt in its current situation, but by making Hunt bigger and better by upgrading the game engine itself instead. The game was then reworked, including a period of downtime where the game was inaccessible before the new engine was published, in what can only be described as one of the worst things to happen to Hunt Shoutout in all of its existence. The crossover to the new engine did not only spawn multitudes of bugs, issues, and crashes, it also froze out a small part of its community, as they were no longer able to keep up with the minimum system requirements, and furthermore introduced a convoluted and incomprehensible UI that had seen barely, if any, testing before its implementation, causing a massive review bomb on the Steam page as a result of this absolute disaster of an engine launch. And here we are, 6 months after the switch to the new engine, experiencing déjà vu after déjà vu as we repeat the same cycles over again, dealing with glitches, bugs, crashes, connection issues, and everything else in between, while we continue to hope that maybe someday Crytek will fix the issues. If you feel confident that Hunt Showdown is currently in a safe and stable place with a solid future ahead of it, I genuinely believe that your heart is in the right place, and I commend you for sticking with it. I will too. This is and will always be one of my all-time favorite games, but at the same time, from where I'm standing, the warning signs are impossible to ignore, and I think that the management at Crytek is the core of the issue. Crytek's development team is nothing short of spectacular and amazing, some of the most talented and most dedicated people you'll find within the industry. However, no matter how great the team is, their capabilities and aspirations are directly tied to and limited by those people who steer the ship. And currently, the approach of Crytek's management certainly does nothing to invoke a sensation of trust in their competencies of taking either Hunt Showdown or Crytek itself in the right direction. I can only hope that the management at Crytek is either swapped out for someone competent, or that the people currently in charge finally wake up and realize the gravity of the situation before it is too late.